All right, so much to cover today. Gas shortage, inflation is real, and of course, more cancellations. Welcome to Church Public. Let's get started. There is a lot going on in the whole world today, America and the Middle East and a bunch of other things. There's just too much to cover. I'm just going to cover a little bit of it because I think it's important. I think it's important to know. I think it's important to understand and maybe interact with in a truthful way. We really are here at Church Public in the interest of truth. There is more and more, it seems, a lot of not truth out there. In fact, it seems like that's one of the things that some of these big platforms are on a campaign against, this misinformation or disinformation. However, my view has always been to deal with misinformation or disinformation or lies or untruth, you just have more truth, because I'm not afraid of the truth. I've never been afraid of the truth. I studied a lot of different world religions. I studied a lot of different philosophies and ideologies, and I always came back to what I believe is the truth, because the truth is going to find the way. The truth is going to get to the bottom of things, the more truth that you have. The dangerous point that we get in over and over again is that we, and when I say we, I mean now especially some of these big tech platforms, some of the politicians want to remove the truth from you. There have been now open campaigns on some of the bigger news outlets on TV against some of the other news outlets on TV to remove them from TV, because to have certain news outlets on TV is bad for society, because then other viewpoints might get out there, and those other viewpoints, of course, are bad. I don't think that's true. I think put whatever you want on TV, put whatever you want on social media to some degree. Now, it's not full freedom. Of course, you can't have full freedom. It never has been full freedom. We want the ideas that are moral, that are valuable to get out there. But at some point, you have to let people decide what those moral values and what those ideologically good values are. So we do want to fight for the good things. We do want to fight for the true things. And that's part of what I'm doing here at Church Public. So if you haven't already, check out churchpublic.com, go to iTunes and Spotify. You can get it now on Amazon Music, I believe. I just signed up for that one. You can go to YouTube, search Church Public as one word, and you can find the videos there. If you're an audio-only listener, thank you very much. But you can also now get this fully on video, and some of the things are interesting on video. Today, we're going to look at a couple of videos as well. So it may help you to see some of those videos. You can check those out at YouTube. Clips are being posted at Instagram and Facebook as well. Again, I really appreciate your support. If you want to help more, you can go to churchpublic.com/support and check out what you can do there. Again, there's just a lot going on. I'm going to go through a bunch of it quickly because I want to introduce you to some of these topics that, if you want, you can research on your own and go more in depth with. There really is no end to the depth of some of the things that we can work through. But I'm just going to go at a cursory look on some of these things because there is just so much going on. I want to cover some of it, and you can go more in depth later. So in American news, you may have heard, but much of the east, like the southeast coast of America, is running out of gas, literally running out of gas. There was a hack on what was named the Colonial Pipeline, which starts basically in Houston and goes up and northeast from there. There were some hackers that hacked into it and basically shut it down. So it is not running and it is not bringing gas to that area, on especially the southeastern portion. I've been researched that about 70% of the fuel comes through this pipeline for that area. Some of the more northwest, not actually Northwest America, but more northwest of the pipeline, get some gas from other areas, so they're doing a little better. But still, this is a big deal. It's a big deal because infrastructure is based on gasoline. That's just the reality of America right now, though some of the politicians would tell you otherwise. And it's important because if you like to eat, or if you like to have those goods and services provided to you by all of these delivery companies, the food that comes in, the supplies that come in, the goods that come in, not to mention you driving yourself to work and things like that. But those all come with gasoline. Not all. A lot of it comes through gas and fuel, and a lot of that is shut down. A lot of flights were shut down in and out of the area because, again, most of the airplanes run on, you guessed it, gas. It's a big deal. One of the officials in the Biden White House was asked about this, and basically that official deferred it back to the owners of the pipeline and said, sorry, it's your problem. Several of the states in the areas have declared national emergencies to try to get more government help, but as of yet, as I checked, not a lot has been proposed. We'll see what today brings, but it is a big deal, and it is a big deal for those that are in the areas, so we want to pray for those that are in the areas. It's also a big deal, like I've got a couple of pictures if you want to add to that. Here is one of the gas stations, big old line there. And this is a gas station with a big old line. You've got this is a nice little big line there, and we've got, of course, I think this is lovely Costco, which of course never closes, but again, lots of lines there. So there's just a lot happening in the world, and we need to make sure that we know so that we can relate to it in a way that is helpful. And if you're in this area, like, help out. And I heard somebody say also, don't hoard. Yes, please don't hoard. I know that whole toilet paper thing that happened last year, like, that was a hot mess, and I still don't even understand that one. But just do what you need to do, and don't take more than you need, because there are people that need some of this right now. And this just continues a trend across America in just inflating prices in general. The White House has said, and some White House economists have said, that inflation is not a thing and it's not happening. However, it is. Bloomberg and a bunch of other actual economic places, even the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the Consumer Price Index, a couple of different indices there, but inflation is going up. You can see if you've tried to build anything lately, lumber is way up, crazy up, like 3, 4, 5 times up what it was at this time last year, which is a big deal. I heard some housing building issues because the price of lumber in some areas has literally doubled in terms of the materials to build the house have doubled in the last year. Steel is up as well in price for what it costs. Home prices, of course, because of this, are up, among other issues. There's the job stuff that's going on. I'm sorry, I'm throwing a lot of facts at you. I don't usually do it that way, but there's just so much going on. I wanted to cover a bunch of things and then get to some of the bigger things that I think are going on. But in the job deal, we're at this impasse that is an unfortunate impasse. And the reason I'm putting all these things together is because they are all related. They're all related in the fact that economy things are, in some sense, turning up, as you see some of the economy numbers turning up, but in other senses, they're not going in a great direction. They're not going in a great direction because inflation is not good. We're going to talk about inflation in a second, but before we get to inflation, let's talk about jobs. There apparently are more than 7 million available jobs, but only, I believe it was last month, about 260,000 people took new jobs. So we're at a weird place where there's a lot of available jobs, and yet people don't want to take these available jobs. Why would that be? Some in the administration are saying that this is because people just haven't felt safe enough to go back to work and other things like that. It seems pretty clear, though, that millions across America have been incentivized to stay home because they're getting either stimulus checks, or on and above that, there are unemployment benefits and extra unemployment benefits that have been given by the federal government and several states. And even California just now offered, I believe, the biggest state incentivized unemployment, at least in California's history, if not in American history. Very, very large incentive that has been proposed in California. But all these people are being incentivized to stay home. They're making more staying home and not working than they are going to work. And that is clear from the numbers, that the numbers, I believe the White House estimate for last month was supposed to be around 1 million new jobs added, and it was about a quarter of that. That's a low number, and that's a problem, because the workforce is what creates economy. When people work and then they move, the economy drives there. Instead, there's a lot of money sitting in the economy because the government has been printing money, but that money has to come from somewhere at some point, because you can't print your way out of a recession. We learned that in the Great Depression. We learned that in 2008 as well, in the crisis there. And so now we get to inflation, and inflation is rising at a really worrying rate. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this consumer price index, again, there's a couple of those. One of them went up 0.8% for about 4.2% over the last year, which may not sound like a very high number. I saw somebody make a joke about it, that, well, what about the other 96% where it didn't go up? Yeah, that's not how that works. So it went up 4.2% over the last year, which is the most it's gone up that fast since 2008. And we all remember 2008 was not a great year for many people in the economy. And then the core CPI, the Consumer Price Index, actually went up around 0.9%, which was the largest jump since 1982. Where is this all going? I can't tell you. I am not an economic expert in that sense, but it is not pointing in a good direction. I can say that for sure. And if it continues at this rate, we're going to have trouble as a national economy, and we're going to have to watch this and figure out what the future will hold. In other news and more global news, I did want to talk about Israel. Personally, I just have a heart for Israel. I will admit that I have never been personally. I really want to go. I am working on some plans, but at the moment don't have a plan to go and would like to go. But beyond that, I have a heart because obviously the story of God comes through the nation of Israel. And I don't believe that God is done with the nation of Israel yet. Even as a follower of Jesus, I can appreciate the contribution of the nation of Israel, and there is still conversation of God in the end, as you get more to the end in some of the prophecies about end times. I don't think God is done with Israel, and as a follower of Jesus, then I think you have to have a heart for Israel. Quite oppositely, many in the news, politics in America seem to, I don't know how hard to put it, hate Israel, not like Israel. Not like doesn't even feel strong enough. There are definitely people, there are definitely sitting representatives of America who hate Israel. That's absolutely clear. I'm not going to name names at this moment, but there are definitely people who hate Israel. And the reasons are unclear. The reasons are, Israel has been called a terrorist nation. I just watched a clip about that earlier. I'm not going to play that, but as you may have seen in some of the news lately, is the bombing towards Israel, people sending bombs to Israel, the Palestinians, has increased dramatically over the past several days. I think I have a clip here. Let me take a look at that. So this is just a night or two ago. These are coming towards Israel, towards Tel Aviv. Israel does have a defense system that took out some of these, but unfortunately it did not take all of them out. I believe I read this morning that a school was hit. And this is terrifying, kind of tragic. And the reality is this has been happening for a long time, but as I was researching it, currently what's happening is escalated to a large degree. Now, what you hear in the news, as I was watching some of the news, is that there are many people who are saying Israel started this, or Israel has fired back and killed people in Palestine, and that may be true. Not that Israel started it, but that they are firing back. But when you have all of these missiles literally being fired at Israel, I don't know what else you would do. They're trying to defend themselves from this. And I don't want to go too far into this Palestine-Israel thing, but I will say, in case you haven't researched all of it, Palestine has not been a nation. It is not a state. It has never been a state. And yet Palestine wants to eliminate Israel, I think, from the face of the earth. They elected Hamas, which does appear to be akin to a terrorist organization, as leaders. You do, have consequences to elections, as we've seen, and this appears to be some of the consequence of things that are going on over there. And in America, because Israel and America have been allies for many, many years and been mutually beneficial beneficial. And because, again, we share a common biblical ancestry, I think there's value in supporting, praying for this organization. And for whatever reason, the Democrats have definitely chosen to back the Palestinians. And it appears, as far as I can tell, that the Palestinians just hate Israel because Israel exists and because Israel is not Muslim. I was doing some research on this. And again, I don't want to get too historical because I know some of you just kind of gloss over when I go that way. But it's interesting to me because it's interesting to know. And I think it's helpful to know where things come from so that we can understand where things are and potentially where things are going. It's obviously terrible when nations are at war and when people are at war, and you never want that, but there are reasons to what's going on here. And it's actually not that complicated. The solution may be complicated, though in the previous administration, I want to say at last count, there were either 4 or 5 peace deals in the Middle East, specifically around the nation of Israel. And now it seems like most of those are going out the window. But it's really not that complicated. The nation of Israel wants to exist, and it's pretty clear that every other country, including Palestine, though not actually a country, every other country around Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, or Egypt, they just want Israel to not exist. It seems like that is really the bottom line here. There have been, as far as I can see and count, according to history, 5 times that the nation of Israel has reached out, or someone on behalf of the nation of Israel has reached out to Arabs in the realm, to this new group called Palestinians in the realm, to try to create a 2-party, a 2-state system. And every single of those 5 times, the Palestinians have said no, the Arabs had said no. It happened in 1947 and 1948 when British troops left. And as soon as they left, again, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt attacked. And then by some miracle, as I would say, Israel survived. And then in 1967, there was another battle where, again, somehow Israel actually acquired more land. And then a little bit later, Israel actually gave back the whole Sinai Peninsula to Egypt just because they had a peace treaty with a new Egyptian ruler. And the promise was just to have peace. And if they promised to have peace, they literally gave all of this land back. Israel has done that for Palestine several times, even several times since. In 2000, Israel proposed trading 95% of the land on the West Bank and a bunch of Gaza to Palestine. The Palestinians again rejected this, either 94 or 95%. And in fact, not only rejected it, but at this time, you may remember, if you're old enough to hear some of this, that they not only rejected it, but sent a bunch of suicide bombers into pizza places and restaurants and cafes, killed like 1,000 people over Israel trying to give them land. It's very clear from looking at the history, from looking at some of these things, that Palestine has no interest in letting Israel exist, period, full stop. Like the motto of Hamas, the governing body of Palestine, is, we love death as much as the Jews love life. They just don't want Israel to exist. The ultimate test is this. The ultimate test is, if Israel said today, we are done fighting, the next day Israel would be wiped off the face of the earth and all the Jews would be killed. Period. That is exactly what would happen. It's clear that's what would happen. The leaders of Palestine have said that is what will happen. If, on the other hand, Palestine and the Arabs said, we are done fighting, the next day there would be peace. Israel has made it clear over and over and over again, they are not interested in killing anyone. They are interested in existing. That is a huge worldview of difference that I hope you can understand, though you will hear vastly different things from the mainline news, from politicians in America, representatives that someone elected that say Israel should not exist, that Israel needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. I cannot get behind any worldview that says the country should be eliminated from existence just for existing, especially when that country is based on the morality and the values of the Bible, the same Bible that I read. Obviously, I'm not Jewish. I don't hold to the end result of where their form of religion goes. But there's a lot of value in history there, and there's a lot of shared worldview there. And we need to, as believers, help where we can help. Again, like one of the biggest commands that Jesus gives us is to help those that cannot help themselves. Now, Israel is actually a very strong nation, which is why they still exist. And again, over and over again, I do believe miraculously, because God is not done with them and God is still doing something with their nation, that they should have been wiped off the face of the earth through some of these battles and some of these wars, and they were not. And I do believe the hand of God is in that. That's all I can say about that. I can't tell you what God's ultimate plan is. I mean, there's speculation, and I'm not going to get into end times things today, but I think we as believers need to stand up and support. And again, in this whole idea of truth is important. It's important to me. It should be important to you. And I just watched a video. I'm not going to play it for copyright reasons, but I just watched a video where a guy went onto a college campus recently, like last week, waved around a flag of ISIS and was chanting at the American college. This happened. ISIS is amazing, and we should all support ISIS, and they get a bad rap. Literally, none of the students did anything. I mean, some of them gave like thumbs up, high fives, like great job. This really happened. I'm not making this up. Then this person exchanged the ISIS flag for a Jewish flag, and you would not believe the amount of hate that he received for this. I just say that to paint the picture that there is a lot of misinformation out there when we talk about misinformation. And I don't believe we should censor misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there that is sending people literally off the cliff into this place where they think things that are not true, and those things they believe are not true lead to real world consequences. And we're seeing real world consequences. When I just played for you that video, if you are listening, you didn't see it, but there are a lot of bombs and rockets flying into Israel right now. People are trying to destroy Israel right now. It's just happening, and it appears to be escalating. And I don't know where the end of that escalation goes. We're all speculating on where this is going to go. It doesn't look like it's going in a good direction right now. And that is all based on, like literally almost all based on a lie. And they're like the TV, the radio, everything around Israel, in the Arab countries around Israel, play almost constantly anti-Israel messages. This is real. This is what happens there. And now apparently some of the people, I'm just gonna say some, I'm not gonna say all, some of the people in colleges around America are also saying these things. We also know that many of the people on the news currently are saying some of these same things. Many of the people in the government of America are saying these same things. And a lot of the things are not true. That's why I personally went and looked at the history of what people are talking about. And a lot of the history that people are citing is not real history. We've seen that in American history with things like the 1619 Project, as opposed to the 1776 actual founding of America, and the 1619 Project, which was reported credibly as not being real. Even the author of it said, well, it's not actually factual, but the idea should be promoted anyway. What? Like, if it's not true, it's not true. And the same thing, 1619, Israel, like we have to stand up for the truth wherever we find it, and we cannot stand behind some of these lies, and it's crazy. And so that leads me to this last cancellation corner that we get to today. I really don't like doing these cancellation corners. Anyway, whatever. I feel like I have to. I feel like I have to because we need to continually understand. We need to know, we need to remember that this is happening. And if you think you're immune to it for some reason, regardless of what side you're on, you're not. If you say one wrong thing, you're out. So latest on the cancellation train that I found just a couple weeks ago was this conservative news outlet called LifeSite News. LifeSite News is fairly conservative. I don't agree with everything they say, and ultimately it doesn't matter. I don't have to agree with everything they say. But they have been banned permanently from Facebook. Apparently, permanently from Facebook. This is a problem. The problem is, who gets to decide what is true and what's not true? Again, my view would be weigh out what you think is true with other information and find the true information. What these companies are now saying, what some politicians are now saying, what some news reporters are now saying is, you're not smart enough to find the truth. This is not me. This is what they're saying to you. You are not smart enough to find the truth, so I'm going to remove what I think is wrong, so I only present you what I think is right. That throughout history, again, going back to history, has never worked out well. Removing truth from people is not the way to make them smarter. Read the book Fahrenheit 451. And I mean, it's such a great book. It's terrifying. If you haven't read it, just like a 10-second, 30-second summary is there are these firefighters in the book. And the firefighters, their job is to find people who are reading books, owning books even, and to burn down their houses and burn their books. And this one person near the beginning of the story says, hey, I heard this legend that firefighters used to actually go and fight the fires to keep things from burning. And everybody goes, that's not true. That never happened. I'm telling you, it sounds crazy, but in this digital realm where we're canceling people, we're digitally having these witch trials with who knows who's at the top of deciding these things. We're literally digitally burning books when if you put a book on Amazon and they don't like it and they can take it off, that is a digital book burning. It is. That is what this is. We need to acknowledge that and realize that's not good for anybody. We don't want to be in this situation as a culture, as a society. So LifeSite News has been banned from Facebook. Several humanist companies have banded together to put pressure onto Facebook to remove the conservative site. This should make you nervous. It should worry you because when these firms band together, put pressure on somebody else to say, I don't like what they're saying, so get them off, and they do it, this is a problem. I'm not worried for the truth because you cannot stop the truth. Jesus talks about that when he's talking to Pilate. So I'm not worried about it from a eternal perspective, from a longevity perspective. We need to stand up for the truth. We need to say the truth. That's really my point, because you can't stop the truth. But to silence people and limit the amount of free sharing and free speech, that is bad for society, because as a society, as a culture, we're elevating immorality. Just look at one of these award shows where they're simulating disgusting acts with each other, and that is praised. And then on the other side, when a site says abortion is wrong, and when a site says that marriage is between a man and a woman, and they're removed from a whole, it's not just a website, and it's not just one thing. The marketplace of ideas, the current cultural locus of all of this, the centrality of all of this is social media. It just is. And you can't go out and make a new one. It doesn't work that way. This is what was created, and there's some legal ramifications and some other things that are happening behind the scenes, but we're going to talk about that today. It's just true that the same culture that is elevating this immorality is trying to remove standard morality, immorality that we have known to be true for literally thousands of years, that elevates societies and elevates the least of these. The people that are saying you can't marginalize certain groups and types of people are the same people that are marginalizing certain types and groups of people. Do you see this? Do you see the irony in this? Whereas biblical values, for now literally thousands of years, are the only values in almost all of human history that have actually elevated marginalized people. This has been true time and time again in terms of elevating rights, in terms of seeing and helping the people that are the least of these. Actual words of Jesus, help the least of these. And Christians have been doing that for centuries and centuries. Some other people have, but by and large, not near the same amount. It's not even close. It's not even close. Because we know as believers that we're doing it for a reason. We're doing it because it's what God wants us to do. We love because God loved us. We just need to be careful with the truth, and we need to promote the truth. And wherever we see not truth, we have to speak against things that are not true. It's true with Israel. It's true with COVID, the oil and gas crisis, the economy, gender, sexuality, abortion, and on and on. You are smart enough to find the truth, but these powers that be are trying to make it more difficult by removing what they don't want you to hear. And many, 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 many people in America just seem fine letting this happen. It is time to stand up for truth and not let the devil have his way. Matthew 5, Jesus says, "Blessed are those that are persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account." God said through his son Jesus that when we stand up for the truth, it might be hard for us. But that's okay. And it's okay because they persecuted Jesus, and we're walking in the footsteps of Jesus, and we want to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. It might not go the way we think it's going to go, but it is so much better to be with Jesus than to be with the world. Hope that God continues to bless you as you stand for the truth, even while the world may persecute you, and I hope that you keep the faith.